Welcome to another episode of Tomes and Tunes. This is episode 66, I think. 66. And I am very excited to bring onto the show the second half of the duo that began last week. Arielle Chavez was my guest last week. If you missed that episode, it was fantastic conversation. And this week, so that's Arielle Chavez, that's one half of Petty Chavez. We have the Petty side today, Simon Petty. All the way from the UK. He lives in Los Angeles now, and I'm very excited to bring him on in a moment. What should I tell you? What do I need to tell you about? Some people have been asking me, how can they tip the guests? And I realize that I've been really great at saying, follow my guests on YouTube, follow them on Spotify or whatever platform you listen to music on, follow them, like their Facebook pages, their Instagram pages, all that stuff. But I have not been very good about getting tip jars from my guests in the past, and so I've chased them down afterwards. But I have Simon's tip jar. I'm going to put it in the chat box in a few minutes. So it's always great to support the independent artists, always great to support the show if you're interested in supporting the show. My tip jar is at that link that's scrolling around the bottom. And speaking of which, for those of you who are listening live or within the next couple of days, if you are on the central coast of California, I'm going to be coming up to you to play my first shows there since the last time I was there was as a performer was in 2006. So it's been a long, long time. So I'm going to be up in the Central Coast playing at Sculptera Winery and Sculpture Garden on Saturday this weekend, and also Puffers of Pismo in Pismo Beach on Sunday. So if you're out there, I would love to see you. And if you just want to know when I'm playing shows in your neck of the woods, because this year I'm going to be sticking to the West Coast, but next year I'm already booking shows a little bit further east. So if you want to know when I'm playing live near you or when I'm playing live streams, at that link that's scrolling by, if you just click on the tour button, you can hit track, and that will let you know when there's a show coming near you. Everything is at that link that's scrolling on the bottom. Pretty much everything except for Simon's tip jar, which I'm going to put on in the feed in a moment just after I introduce him, bring him on. I'm going to bring him on right now. Hi, Simon.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm great, thanks. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, well, really fun to have you guys back to back, like bookends, right here. And we're ending August with you, so that's pretty fun. I'm so curious about so many things about your career, but also just about how someone... So I'm an East Coaster that now lives in Los Angeles, and it took me years to... like know the name of the grocery store, figure out my way around town. I still use Waze like it's my best friend if I have to get anywhere. It's really disorienting just to move across the country. I had lived in a lot of states before, but there's something about literally moving, 3,000 miles away that just was disorienting. You have crossed an ocean and a continent and landed in Los Angeles. How did that happen? What was that like, that transition for you? Can you put yourself back in that mindset of when you did that?
It was 22 years ago, middle of 99. And my band Minibar had been playing in London for quite some time. And it was Britpop days. And we had some Britpop influences, but we also... listened to a lot of Neil Young, and we had a pedal steel guitar and 3-part harmonies, and it was much more kind of there was much more of a West Coast sound. I remember hearing Wilco's album being there and just going, oh, someone else is doing this too, like I didn't know that anyone else was doing it. And we felt just in the wrong place at the right place at the wrong time, maybe with Britpop. And our managers booked us a gig at the Viper Room and at the Troubadour, and so we came over, and
Classic.
and we and they got lots of industry people there, and someone saw us, and we got a deal. You know, it was just an absolute miracle. And then went back to England and waited for a long time for the deal to go through. So by the time we came to LA, we were desperate. I've been desperate to come to LA for a long time. Come to America, and by the time we got here, we were incredibly happy to be here. I mean, it was disorientating, but you know that we wanted it to be. I think.
Yeah. Why did you want to come to LA for a long time? Was it the music? What was it about LA?
Yeah, I think I've been steeped in the West Coast tradition. The Laurel Canyon music was the music I've been listening to, and there's, you know, I'd always felt that there was an openness. Maybe I've idealised it somewhat, but I think there's an openness and a limitless feel somehow to being here that attracted me, because coming from Britain, which is a very small place with a lot of people in it, and it just felt as if there was open space here, and some form of I don't know, it's just some form of opportunity would come in. I'd been here when I was travelling. I lived in Australia for a year or so, and I was coming back, and I came through LA when I was like 24, bought a car for $300 and drove it. Oh man, drove it to Austin. Those are the days. But I remember coming to LA and going like, oh, I just could spend some time here. That would be a good idea. And then I suppose it was about 8 years later, it eventually came. So,
you know, narrative is everything. When I was on tour, had never been to LA, but I had some dates booked in LA, and I came out here and I was terrified. Narrative is everything. I had bought those stories about, I mean, I knew the music, but I had bought the stories about, I mean, in my mind, it was constant riots, constant fires, constant shootings, carjackings, like all kinds of earthquakes, all of the things all at once, and I was terrified about driving in, that all of these things were going to happen in the 5 days that I had planned to be here, and I drove in, and I think the first place that I saw was Studio City. It's like, Banana Republic and Panera Bread and the palm trees and the khaki pants that everybody was wearing, and I was just like, huh? Like,
I think basically that was what my mum thought LA was as well, and that was her. She'd seen sort of Rodney King and the Northridge earthquake, and she was like, why,
why would you go?
Why would you go there? But there are other things going on too, so fortunately.
Yeah.
But yes, it was an adjustment for sure, but it was one I was aching to make,
Yeah. I hear what you mean about the space. Ultimately, that was when I was on tour, but I continued, I stayed on the road for some time. But later, when I moved to LA, I felt I had lived on the East Coast my whole life. I also had lived in Nashville for a short while, but in my mind, Nashville was kind of just like this, like just step off of the East Coast. Like it still felt like part of that scene. And
wow, that's funny, because
yeah,
it seems so different to me. But
I know. But I I'm a Florida native, and I had lived in North Carolina, and I had lived in a lot of states up and down the East Coast, and I had driven that route. I had gone all the way down to Key West and all the way up through Maine, and it just felt like, even though there's a lot of beautiful natural woodsy spaces, I mean a lot, but it still felt like you're only a stone's throw away from people everywhere I went. I just felt like I couldn't get lost, and there was something I just needed space. It was it was strange, because there is space, but it was a psychological, it was a mental thing. I just felt like I needed space, and something about living on the West Coast feels like, that there's that space that I was looking for. It's the Wild West. It's like we've got the big city of Los Angeles and the big city of San Francisco and, other urban areas between and north, of course. But you could drive for hours and hours and it's just pretty empty.
Yeah. No,
I love that.
I love it too. I only got to Lake Tahoe this year for the first time. To do some hiking with my friend John, and sadly it's all smoked out right now, and they're worried it's going to be a victim to more fires. But just to get up there, and I couldn't believe I hadn't been. It was one of those things. It's so beautiful, and there's just mountain after mountain. I'm a keen hiker, and there's just so much space. It's like a wilderness, It's like the Great Wild. It just goes on and on. From there all the way down to Sacramento, there's just this huge area. It's just it feels so open and beautiful. And so that's just another bit. And we were talking about Pismo just beforehand. I mean, that we still got halfway up the coast. It's just so beautiful, And I love it.
Where in the UK are you from originally?
Well, my dad was a vicar. A minister, so we moved around a lot, quite a lot. I mainly grew up in Manchester, from sort of 8 to 20. I was in Manchester, so that was the main. But crucially, I didn't learn to speak in Manchester. I learned to speak in London, so I have an accent that kind of moves around Britain depending who I'm talking to. And now it's got an American thing. My brothers think I speak completely American, so.
That's
but
funny
they talk completely differently too.
The first time I met you, which was not that long ago, it was at the Ojai Underground, and I understand you absolutely, completely, no problem right now. But when I first met you, my ears had to I had to turn some knobs or something to adjust to your accent. So that's funny to me that that they think you're now completely American.
They do.
Yeah.
But it's important in England where what you sound like. It's accents are very, very regional, and you can go 30 miles and it sounds completely different. And everybody knows. Like for instance, Manchester and Liverpool have very different accents, but they are very short. 30, 40 miles apart, and everybody knows if you're from Manchester or from Liverpool just by the way you speak. It's just which is a strange thing. But it's also you have to be sensitive to it. So when I got to school when I was 8. And I was like, "Hello, everybody. My name's Simon. I'm from Surrey." And it didn't go down well.
And why does it not? Is it because of that just human thing that people identify who the outsider is?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also like there's also a kind of a class thing that goes on with regional accents too, and how broad your regional accent can say a lot about your background as well. Which isn't necessarily right, but it's just kind of the way things are. And obviously now it's very cool to have a regional accent, and people are celebrated for coming from Manchester, coming from Liverpool. But back in the 60s, you wouldn't hear on the BBC. It was called, received pronunciation, and everybody spoke exactly the same way, terribly clipped and nicely. And whether so you could that was kind of received pronunciation. It's it's awful, isn't it? That's what they called it. So I mean that's definitely not true anymore. But at the same time, I was very sensitive to not sounding right. As soon at the age of 8 or whatever, and had to change my accent at a young age, which then kind of changed back when I left.
Like I said, I'm from Florida originally, and that's where I learned to speak. Course, until I was 6 and moved up to New York, to Queens, New York with my grandparents, and then the next year moved to New Jersey. But my parents were both from New York, and they had moved to Florida for various reasons. And so when I was learning to speak, I was learning in part from my parents and in part from my peers in preschool. And I remember my mom, me coming home and saying, "I'm tired, Mama, I'm tired." And my mom would be like, "You are tired," and just kind of correcting me. Have you listened to that podcast called Dolly Parton's America? Have you heard of
No,
that?
I haven't, no.
it is phenomenal. Episode 7, I had to pull over and just cry for a little bit, but it's a really great podcast. It's not hosted by Dolly Parton. It's about Dolly Parton, and the sort of the the idea behind the podcast is, why is it the podcast was made a couple of years ago, and the question was, why is it that in such a divided America you can go to a Dolly Parton concert and see the MAGA hats and the drag queens, and they're all singing along to Dolly Parton's songs, and it's like how is it that she is this figure that somehow appeals across these lines that normally would never be in the same room together? And over various episodes, it gets deep into not only who Dolly Parton is, and tries to get at like her mission, almost like what her mission statement is as a human being, but also it moves across the world to look at her influence both as a musician and songwriter, and as just that mission, and to look at that influence. But in one of the episodes, it gets into a college course on Dolly Parton, and I think the college course might be where the podcast got its name. It might be called Dolly Parton's America. But in that course, there's a moment where the interviewer is talking to the students in the course, and they're all from Tennessee and from these like small towns in the South, and they talk about this idea of accents and how some of them fiercely held on to their accents, almost like a stubborn identity, like this is who I am, and others allowed it to be shaped by kind of flattened into whatever not the BBC but the NPR or CBS or whatever accent here in the United States, like in that need to be accepted or to not be judged, as coming from the backwoods South, which is really where Dolly Parton is from. So
yeah, she never did that though, did she? I mean, that's her thing. It's like she's just so open, completely open and completely honest, especially in the way she sings and writes. It's just brutal and beautiful,
Oh, Carol's
I've got to hear it.
Carol's
I've got to
coming
hear
in
the
from Essex and Surrey. Carol
No,
Barber.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Carol.
Hi, Carol. Nice to see you.
Speaking of which,
We were just talking about so I was in Surrey when I learned to speak. So that's so we have a bond there. Yeah.
So you so I live near I live near the Burbank Airport. So that's what you.
It could be here. We're Santa Monica Airport's down there.
Our airplanes might be. I mean, there might be an airplane leaving from you and arriving here, right? Like for the folks that just want to get around the LA traffic.
Right.
So tell me about books, because sometimes I have guests on the show who sometimes are not, like, some people are really big readers. They love books, and other people not so much, and they kind of pull a book from the shelf because I've asked them to. But for you, you're actually a reader. You love literature. Is that right?
When I was yes, and I was thinking about this before. So when I was a kid, I used to get 4 books out from the library at the time. I was just obsessed in a good way. I remember not some books, if I really loved them, I wouldn't finish them because I couldn't bear the world to end. And that's how much I love the books.
If you love them, you wouldn't finish them.
Yeah, I can't finish it because it's over. So I have to leave it open. That kind of thing. So I was very always won over by stories, and always wanted to be inside the book to feel it. And then I ended up taking a degree in literature as well. So my reading carried on. So I've always been, it comes and goes. I'm not going to pretend I read all the time, because that's not true either. But when I get into something, it takes over sometimes.
Yeah. I think that there can be too much of anything, right? And there's a time to put the book aside and live, and or write your own story. But yeah, can you attribute it to anybody, this love of literature for you? Do you remember where it started or when it started? Or
Well, I think my mum would take us to the library most days, and it was such a haven for me. It was such a, you know, it was like I can smell it. I can hear the clunk of the stamp. You know, those old stamps that they used to use to tell you when you could bring your book back. And so my mum was instrumental in getting us to read. My parents used to read to us as well, which is a beautiful thing to do, I think. I remember in as far as reading a book, you could get lost in it. To hear someone read it to you, you could be completely lost in it. And I remember reading there was a book called Midnight is a Place, and it was about by this woman Joan Aitken, and I don't know. I was quite young when my dad was reading it to me, and it was about Victorian industrial Manchester, and these kids being put to work, and it was beautifully written, but it terrified me. I was like, you know, really, it was like too much for me to listen to it. I remember my dad having to change the book over, although I did finish it in the end, and it's an amazing book. But that kind of, you know, that. And you know, we also got to remember in the 70s in Britain, with 2 channels of TV, you know, so one of which we weren't allowed to watch because it wasn't the BBC. So, you know, that's my parents for you right there. We were allowed to watch BBC children's television, and that was it. So, you know, you have to make your own fun. So that's another reason why maybe I disappeared into books more than anything else, because I wasn't watching TV. I wasn't really allowed to. So, so that's where I got my stories and my entertainment from, as well as everything else.
Do you write also? But I know you write songs, but do you also write literary work? Do you write poetry, things that aren't meant to be with music?
Yeah, I've started writing poetry during the pandemic, actually. I don't know, everything changed. I couldn't listen to, I stopped being able to listen to podcasts, weirdly enough. I don't know what that was about, but it was just too much. I didn't, you know, and I loved them before, but I just was like, I can't deal with the outside world. I stopped writing songs, and then started writing. So I listened to Billy Collins's masterclass course on poetry, and it was really inspiring. And so I watched it with Salia, and then we wrote a poem, you know, straight afterwards. And
you co-wrote a poem?
No, God,
you wrote.
No, that would be okay. We're quite twinsy, but we're not writing poems together. We've got writing songs together, Arielle. That's as intimate as it gets. You can't write a poem with each other. No, that would be. I guess we could do that, but no. We sat next. But yeah, we sat next to each other on the couch writing poems, and it was lovely. And I got very. So I was getting up early most mornings and writing poetry, which is a huge relief. I you know, everything was. It was my way of dealing with it, because. Not to say that things are necessarily, you know, but things are at least things are different now. They're not the same. There's definitely a lot of stuff still going on, but you know.
Yeah, emotionally.
October 2020, or this time last year, there was a lot of stuff going on. The lockdown had lifted a little bit, but everything was going on. The election was coming up, and absolutely, you know, wildfires everywhere, and you know, I guess we've got most of this stuff is still happening, but I felt a sense of impending danger all the time. I think that's the way I put it. And so writing poetry was it was maybe slightly more detailed. Also, again, there's that feeling of you can go anywhere with this. Not that I can't do that with a song, but there was something different about just waking up in the morning. And I now know this to be true as well. You can look at an empty page and go like, I'm not going to write a song ever again. I'm not going to write a poem ever again, because it scares me seeing the open page. But if you need to write, for me sometimes at least, it was like, it's amazing. I could go anywhere with this. It can go. I'm going to start writing, and it'll take me where it needs to take me. And that was hugely important. And a couple of the songs that we do, couple of the songs that we do as Petty Chavez were started as poems. It's not usually like that, because it tends to be the way I write poetry is less formed and less structured and less, like it's not one of the points is that you don't have to be as constrained by meter and rhyme,
Yeah.
as you are in song. But a couple of them, there's one called The Valley of the Kings, which I wrote as a poem, and also The Twilight of My Years was a poem before it became.
Peter Krantz asked what inspired Valley of the Kings, and since you just mentioned it,
that's so funny. It is very.
put that up.
It is kind of. Like a historical novel, isn't it? I had this idea that. I had this idea that the narrator is some kind of is an explorer, and he's on a ship, and he's heading round the Bay of Biscay and going into the Mediterranean and trying to find antiquities in Egypt. But there was also, metaphorically speaking, there's somebody waiting for him. There's something waiting for him, or somebody waiting for him, buried deep inside the pyramids, waiting to be discovered. And I suppose it's metaphorically speaking, it's somebody looking for love and it not coming easily, I suppose. But it destined to be still. And I don't know where that idea came from. I guess I just started, as I said, I just wrote it I was writing it as a poem.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I'm fascinated by that, by the idea of archaeological plundering that the British went on and did. But so it comes from a yearning to find something, I suppose.
Beautiful. I hear what you're saying about the beginning of the pandemic. Last March, for here in Los Angeles anyway, March 13th, 2020 is when I sort of mark the day, even though I think that the official quarantine here didn't start for a couple days after that. For me, that Friday the 13th, March, because I was catering a yoga retreat that weekend, and that morning I was doing a last shopping trip for the retreat. I had been hoping that the retreat was going to be canceled because, of course, I was aware of the news and very concerned, and there was such high anxiety everywhere. And I went to the grocery store that morning because the retreat was not canceled, and it was just a freak out. It was very weird feeling. It was Trader Joe's, which is generally such a friendly place, but you could just see the fear in everybody's eyes. And I couldn't get out of there fast enough, but I had to buy a lot of things that particular morning. And then by the time I got back after the retreat was over, I pretty much just drove home, and I didn't leave the house again for 6 months, except to go to the grocery store once every 2 weeks. And it was
sounds familiar.
Yeah, and I'm still only going to the grocery store once every 2 weeks, which is very different than what life was like before the pandemic. But you're right. I woke up this morning thinking about how everything just feels very different right now than it did 12 months ago. Last summer, or a year and a half ago. There's something different. And I also stopped listening to podcasts at that time, at the beginning of the pandemic. And I started listening to, it used to be that I would toggle between podcasts and audiobooks or talking on the phone when I go for a long walk every day. And I just stopped listening to podcasts at that time, pretty much. I felt like I didn't want to, I love memoir as a genre, but I didn't want to listen to or read any memoir either. I wanted to read fiction. I wanted to read, a lot of it was historical fiction that I got into at that time. just transport me out of this time, this place, and place me in another time and place. And inevitably, one of the things that came up in a lot of the books I was reading or listening to on audio, either or, um, there was often some kind of pandemic that would show up that I had kind of forgotten about, or maybe hadn't known about at all. You know, had just not been the focus of the narratives that I had paid attention to before. But it was really healing to kind of put that in some kind of context. Like, oh yeah, you know, of course the flu epidemic at the beginning of the 1900s, but then also same thing at the beginning of the 1800s and the end of the 1700s, and you know, just like understanding, oh yeah, this comes up and it comes up and it comes up, and there's no reason why we should think that we in this particular time would be immune to something like this. It helped me get through that time, that beginning.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. Yeah, there was a 1665. There was a bubonic plague in London, and they reckon it only. There was then the Great Fire of London in 1666,
right.
which is the reason why it burnt. You know, they think it kind of burnt all the rats out of the.
It was the solution.
That was the key that turned the tide against it. Yeah, I remember going to a plague village in the
plague village.
Yeah, well, it's called Eyam. Maybe a plague village is the wrong. I've been to a plague village in Ireland as well, so that doesn't. Maybe I'm getting the two things confused. But I remember when I was little. I've never
heard those two words put together like that. That's interesting.
Well, it was the story. I remember it made a huge impression on me. The place is called Eyam, and I'm thinking it's like 1750, somewhere around there. There was a huge plague again, and Manchester was a centre of cotton mills and textiles, and this village was on the way, and they it's like a trading post, and but they'd had the pandemic. It was it was like the second wave of a pandemic, a deadly pandemic, and suddenly there was an outbreak in this little village. They think it was because some I don't know if the fleas or whatever came in some textiles. Anyway, the point is it was like an isolated village that had the plague in the middle of the countryside, and the vicar decided that they would completely isolate themselves from the rest of the world. So yeah, quarantine. But knowing that there was no treatment, and knowing that they would probably all catch it, or a large percentage of people would catch it, but just to stop the second wave from spreading further. And I remember hearing about this story and seeing they had like maybe I'm remembering this wrong, but it looked a bit like a baptismal font out in the middle of a field, and they used to put stuff in there in kind of vinegar, the trade stuff, so people could bring them supplies from the other villages, and they put stuff in there and kind of wash it in vinegar to bring it back into the village and stuff. It made a huge impression on me. It was like terrifying. I was thinking, I remember thinking I couldn't, it was very brave.
Right.
And a lot of people died in the village.
One of the authors that I got into this year is Maggie O'Farrell, and she's she has a book called Hamnet. I've talked about it on this show before. It really made an impression on me. It's based on the idea that maybe Shakespeare's Hamlet was written as sort of a therapeutic way for him to deal with the death of his son from the plague. His son's name had been Hamnet, and he had died a few years prior to Hamlet.
I didn't know that.
I didn't pick up. I picked up the book because I was interested in the idea of where did Hamlet come from, and of course not really thinking about the fact that this is going to be a book about plague, about the plague.
That's amazing.
And here I am in the middle of COVID and reading this book, but it's so beautifully written, and it was really one of the best books that I've read in the last year and a half. I loved it.
I'll go and check that out. That sounds fascinating.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I actually when I was very lucky when I was at high school, I played the part of Hamlet.
Oh.
Which is like the longest part in Shakespeare.
Yeah, wow.
It's a long time ago.
Yeah.
I remember in those days, I just read it out loud, like 5 times, and I could remember everything because I had like a photographic
Oh
photographic memory.
gosh.
This
I
does
wish
not
I were
happen
you.
anymore. I can't read the shopping list and remember anything. But
Yeah.
back in those days, it was yeah.
What
Wow.
about songs? How do you learn your own songs? This is something I've never talked with another songwriter about, but that's a tricky thing. It's easier for me now, but it used to be a real hard thing to remember my songs. I had to like really, really work hard at that.
That's funny you should say that. Because I'm going to play a song that I just wrote later, and I don't know if I can remember it, and I'm kind of worried that I can't. Now I'm worried I can't remember. Now I'm even more worried I can't remember it properly because I haven't played it very often. It's kind of sticks. It kind of sticks in there. I don't know if you do this when I'm writing a song. It's I don't write it down until I get to a certain point because I want it to be malleable, I guess. So
This
it's
is
like
definitely not my process. This is awesome to hear.
I usually write in the mornings, so I'm writing stuff, and I have to get it to a point where where I feel it's like a tipping point. It's like we now have the song. It's like it's got a verse. I know where it's going. We have the chorus, or like at the point of it, or it has to have its own momentum. It has to have its own life before I can commit it to the page. That's not always true, but it's mostly true. So it's because once it's written down, my process changes, and it's like fill in the blanks. We only need a bridge. I hate that line in verse 3. All the kind of mechanics of songwriting, which are hugely important. That we both know how. You have to do this stuff.
Yeah.
But there's something about. I think that's a different process from the moment of creation. This could go anywhere. I don't know what's going to happen. That feels right. That's that line follows nicely. It's So a lot. In some ways, I've had to play the song over and over and over again. By the time even by the time I finish writing it, so it tends to stick. From that, he says that now, knowing full well I'm just gonna mess it up when I come to play my new song.
That's interesting because I've heard this as good advice. The advice being, remember that the writer and the editor are two different roles,
Mhm.
and so you should write and just like check the editor out the door, and then bring the editor in. And for me, that piece of advice has never worked, neither as a songwriter nor as a literary writer. I am constantly, in order for me to move forward, I have to move back and forward and back and forth. It's a very slow process for me, and I think that it's somewhat circular, except I'm inching forward each time a little bit, but have to retrace my steps. And I think that part of that is a necessary process for me to understand what it is I'm even writing about. But I wish I was more of the writer who could just write a draft and then go back and start the editing, the revising process. But that's just that's not what I've ever been able to do.
I totally take. I mean, I think that editing thing is going on all the time. It's part of the process, and I feel I don't know if this happens to you. I also have this. You can't eat. You can't eat. If you eat, it changes your physiology and it just takes you out of the space. So I get to the point. And I'd be drinking some English. I've been drinking tea, and it's like I've started writing the song at, whenever I woke up, and I haven't eaten. And I've been drinking tea, and when I smoking a bunch of cigarettes, and just basically about to pass out because I'm so lightheaded, and it's 2:00 in the afternoon. But I've got to get I've got to get the thing before it changes. It's got to get a life of its own. I've got to give it a life of its own before I can. Before I can change, because there's something about I feel there's something about songs that they have their own mood and they have their own personality, and at some point they become not yours soon after you've written them, or even maybe during the writing of them, and that's when I love that about them. It's like wow, look at that over there, it's now I can see it properly. That works or that doesn't work. Most of the time most of the time it's like, Okay, next one. But there is that. I think that's, for me, that's part of the joy of it, is that, I don't know, I don't know whether you've had this, but like there's two or three, no, more than that, but there's been several times in my life where I've just sat down with the guitar and it's just come straight out, like they say.
You can't really recollect you don't remember the process.
Don't know how it happened.
Yeah.
Don't know. It just came flying out. I remember once I wrote a song. I was in the ocean and I'd written, and I biked home to write. I didn't even have a guitar, and I biked home, and by the time I got home, I had 6 verses. The 6 verses. So when it hits you, it's like, oh my God, write it down, say it to your phone or something. I do that sometimes if I'm lucky, but most of the time, man, if you could do that, wouldn't you just do that all the time? Just wake up and go, whoa, there's another song. Here we are. Let's have some toast.
I wish. For me, I am writing. I mean, literally, I have to be writing it down in my phone memo with me, or the voice memo. So I'm generally environmentalist. I do try to watch my consumption of things, and when it comes to songwriting, the paper that I use for a song is embarrassing, because it completely flies in the face of that. But my handwriting is giant, and like when I'm writing a song, like it's not conserving space at all, and it's like I have, like, every idea I have, I'm recording that idea on my phone, I'm scratching it out on a pad of paper, and then I like rip off the paper and then kind of make my way through. I have all these those like legal white pads. I go through too many of them, and I have my phone memo, and it's like I'll go through like 50 memos as I'm like going through that and going through the papers, and then I have that moment of guilt. Arielle, you're using too much paper, so you flip it over. But
That's
of
not
course,
a
on
waste
these
of paper.
pads,
That's
on
not a
these
waste of
pads, they
paper.
look the same on the back and the front. So it's like there's a moment of stress. But it's funny, some songs, like the ones that you're talking about, that just kind of come. I haven't had a song like from the moment of sitting down just come like that for a while, but I have had like days of like trying to get the engine to go and going down all the wrong roads, using all the wrong things, and then all of a sudden there's a song, and it's complete. It's like, how did it get from like days of like wah to all of a boom, there's something. There's something like I lose. It's like I fell into a black hole or something in that time. Like I've lost sense of time. I don't know how it got from. I can remember the agitated state and the irritated state of not getting anywhere. And then there's a moment, it's like that Narnia wardrobe. It's like I slip out of time, and poof, there's a song.
There's your song.
Poof.
I just thought of something else as well. Because I love the detail of the pads and the writing, and because it's a physical thing, right?
Yeah.
There's also an important stage when I go from because I do write stuff on the pad. I have a book or a pad or whatever. I write on paper, and then there's a further editorial move, which is when I write it onto my iPad. So it's to clean it all up, because I've got terrible writing. So
that's when it's almost at a finished place, right?
Kind of, yeah. And
then
it gets very set in stone, but then it's also quite tweakable as well, because then it's kind of looks a bit more, and then I'm really in edit mode rather than any kind of creative thing. But that's great. I love talking about this stuff. It's so weird and cool. So that's another stage of the process. And it's, by the time you're putting on the iPad, it's not going to change that much. It's either going to work or it's not going to work.
Right.
And then I can look at it and go like, this is a goer, or this is not, or I can pursue stuff the way you were talking about, like over time as well. It's not like it has to be done in a day at all, but it's just that for the initial burst of the song has to be done in this, and for me it has to be done in one sitting.
Yeah, I hear you. That frenzy, and that lightheadedness that happens also. That idea of like not interrupting the process to eat. For me, I don't have an iPad. I go to the screen, I add it in only when I finally need the chart for someone. I'm terrible about it, actually.
Oh, that's cool.
So eventually, though, I do transfer it to a book that I have of lyrics that are, because it's an actual book, with bound pages. It's really just a chronology of, the songs in order of when I've written them. But at that point, I do have a bottle of Whiteout. I'm so old. I mean, I'm so 1970s or something. I have a bottle of Whiteout.
I love it.
I don't have an iPad.
It's so good.
And so it's I write the song, but then I have that bottle, and it's there'll be some word changes and it takes a little while sometimes from that point for the melody. I think this is where the line is between being a songwriter and an artist. And for me, it crosses over at this point where it takes a little while for the melody to fully sit down in a way that I feel is the way that I want to express it as a singer. And I don't know that another singer would express this particular song in that particular way, but for me, it's that's where the rehearsal and the going over and over, and that's why, because of that, I think because I've been performing now, the memorization comes faster because of that part of it.
Yeah. No, it's learning how to sing it is a different, it's a slightly different process for sure. But being able to put it across is the key thing, and then you can maybe finesse that a little bit as well. I was thinking about this. I was talking about the Beatles the other day, and they didn't seem to, at least in the early stuff, they didn't seem to need to do it. They just they came in with those arrangements and the phrasing, and that it was so. It's everything is so complete. They recorded things the day they wrote them, and it would be. And it's the stuff that and it's how did you didn't sit there, banging your head against the wall like the rest of us for days and days and wondering whether we should put the bridge next and learning and there was such a spontaneity, and yet the finished product is so crafted and beautiful. I mean, the later years there was more experimentation, but. Which is great as well because it was more experimental music. But I was thinking, I always look at that stuff and they're like, okay, so you wrote so you wrote the whole of Help and then Rubber Soul in 4 days. What's it defies belief. But it was also very inspiring. It's good to have goals, I guess, as a writer.
Well, like I said, I stopped. I don't listen. Well, I love podcasts. I haven't been listening to that many, but the one exception is whenever I hear of an interview with Laurie McKenna, who's one of my favorite songwriters. Whenever I hear an interview with her is out, I'll listen to that. And so I was just listening to an interview with her the other day, and she was saying that there's this thing that if you're playing at the Bluebird in Nashville, if you're a writer, if you wrote a song that day, you should play it. And I was thinking, ooh, I don't know that I would. I feel like I would want to, but I'm not that polished of a songwriter yet, where I can write it that morning, perform it that night, and feel like it's all in place. It's the pieces are still moving around. Even a couple days later, so maybe even a couple of weeks.
I have done that. I've done that once. So a major part of my courtship of Celia revolved around me writing a song and then playing it in a party. Pamela Day Barr is a wonderful friend of mine and of ours, and she has a Christmas party, and we were both invited to the party, and I don't know whether we were dating or not. She'll shout through from the other room, let me know my mistake if we were or we weren't. But I'd written this song, and Pamela said, "Oh, does anybody have any new songs?" And I said, "Actually, I wrote this morning." And then
I just heard her in the background.
Don't tell them. She's like this. Don't tell them anything. No, I've told this story. I've told this story before, but yes. Anyway, so I start playing this song, and then it becomes apparent to Sally that it's about her. You know, about halfway through, I imagine. And anyway, as I say this in gigs, but it was high risk strategy, to put it mildly. I was either going to get that guy's a stalker, you know.
Yeah.
It's going to be okay.
Yeah, the handbag across the face.
Yeah, it was going to be like, wow, this guy's a bit much. But I think it all panned out in the end.
It appears to.
So yeah, so I have played one. Yeah, at a very crucial moment, I have played something that I just wrote that day.
Well,
yeah.
Simon, I want to keep talking with you about songwriting because this is really awesome.
It's so fun.
But I know that you have a poem it's
Oh,
Tones
yeah.
and Tunes, so we got to get back to books.
Oh, yeah, books,
And so
yeah.
tell me what you've been reading.
Well, I'm reading, and I've been
I should
reading.
ask you a question that I forgot to ask before we went live on the show. Do you need to jump? Do you have anything that
No.
like we have a couple minutes? Okay, cool.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Great.
Well, it's nearly tea time. You
Oh,
so
except
that's
for the tea
that's
part,
important.
yeah.
But I already had
The
a cup
tea
of
and
tea, so we'll be
biscuits.
okay. I'm reading on my iPad actually the Unconsoled, and I'm going to say Kazuo Ishiguro. I'm going to say it like that, but I don't know if that's actually how you pronounce it. But he's a famous Japanese English author. He wrote The Remains of the Day, among other things, and Never Let Me Go, which is a beautiful book as well. And I'm reading this book, and I think it got absolutely panned and won prizes. You know, it's one of those books, and I'm most of the way through it actually, because this is modern technology. I'm 78% of the way through my book, which I never really think about. That's what it says here, and I don't know what I think about the book. It's fantastic. This is a book that I'm reacting. The reason why I'm interested in talking about it is because I'm reacting to this book in a way that I haven't reacted to a book before. It's incredibly frustrating. Basically, it's a bad dream. It's a nightmare, and it's about a concert pianist who comes to this German town, and he has a concert and a performance in 3 days. I think. It's not exactly. I think this is what's happening, and so it's anxiety. It's this massive book of anxiety, getting in cars and driving to another house, and then getting lost in the corridors, and then losing his hat and his children. Is it his child? It's just this whole. It's a stressful, anxious musical performance dream. These are dreams I have. You know, these are the dreams that musicians have. We have. I mean, I don't know about you, but I have you know, I don't have my cables. I've got to play on TV. I'm like, what? I don't know this. I don't know that. I've got to sing the entire contents of the Bible. You know, those kind of dreams. You know, what am I doing here? And it's like that. It's like that, and I hate it. I can't stop reading it. You know, and I think I'm almost sure that nothing is going to be resolved, and that all these strands of the story, and there's a lot of strands because it's been, you know, he has it's a series of crazy dreams. Well, not even crazy, just you know, stuff is happening all the time, and it's not going to come together. I don't think there's going to be a performance. I don't think there's going to be any unification of it. It doesn't feel like that kind of book at all, which is going to. You know, now you think I'm annoyed about it now. I'm going to be really annoyed about it. Right? At the same time, I'm fascinated by my own reaction to this book.
Yeah.
I'm in it. You know, I'm in that dream. I want to know, it's beautifully written as well. Just so he has a beautiful, clear style. So I feel very, you know, very involved in the book. I don't, it's kind of against my will. So that's why. So I'm reading that, and then I'm reading this book at the same time, which is called Medical Grade Music, and it's ghostwritten by my friend Ben Thompson, who sent me this lovely copy of it, and it's about this guy over here is called Steve Davis, and he was an incredibly successful, incredibly famous snooker player. There is no such thing as an incredibly famous, successful snooker player in America, but there was such a thing in the 80s in Britain. Turns out he likes snooker, but he loves progressive music, and always has done. And it's not music that I listen to particularly, although I have started listening to it because he's so excited about it. And he's in a band with another oddball, Chavez Tarabi, and they're writing about their life together. They made a band together, and they kind of DJ together, and they become friends. And the most unlikely partnership you can imagine. And it's a really uplifting book. I don't have to like the music to love the fact that they love the music so much.
Right.
That's the thing. That's what I think is magical about this. It's like they're just so enthusiastic and everything about it, and put gigs on by obscure French progressive bands just because he had the money from playing snooker to do so. I mean, that kind of stuff I just love. Anyway, so I'm reading that. So that's my light relief, and it's a book about music that makes me feel happy. And I'm now listening to Magma. So if you like your prog, wow.
I hope Charlie Silvestri is listening to this, because I was interviewed on his podcast, and he asked me in that interview if I had ever considered playing prog rock. And we had a whole conversation about it. So I hope he's plugged in today. So do you have a poem or something?
Yes,
that you
I
had
have
mentioned
a poem.
And so
Yeah. So it's funny
is
you
it?
talk about NPR. It's Billy Collins, and I didn't know who he was, and I didn't know his poetry, and I heard him read this poem on an NPR show, and I had to pull over because I was so overcome because it's just so beautifully done. So yeah, I'm going to read that. It's called "This Much I Do Remember." It was after dinner. You were talking to me across the table about something or other. A greyhound you had seen that day, or a song you liked. And I was looking past you over your bare shoulder at the 3 oranges lying on the kitchen counter next to the small electric bean grinder, which was also orange, and the orange and white cruets for vinegar and oil, all of which converged into a random still life, so fastened together by the hasp of colour and so fixed behind the animated foreground of your talking and smiling, gesturing and pouring wine, and the camber of your shoulders, that I could feel it being painted within me, brushed on the wall of my skull, while the tone of your voice lifted and fell in its flight, and the 3 oranges remained fixed on the counter, the way stars are said to be fixed in the universe. Then all the moments of the past began to line up behind that moment, and all the moments to come assembled in front of it in a long row, giving me reason to believe that this was a moment I had rescued from the millions that rush out of sight into a darkness behind the eyes. Even after I've forgotten what year it is, my middle name and the meaning of money, I will still carry in my pocket the small coin of that moment, minted in the kingdom that we pace through every day. Right?
Oh my gosh.
Right. So it moves me every time I read it. It's so beautiful. And yeah. So that's when I found out that he had this masterclass course. I was like, let's see if he's got anything to say for himself. He's got a lot to say for himself. He's an extremely entertaining, erudite man. And yeah. So that's my literary gem for the day.
I was just writing about memory and pressing moments into memory for my Patreon followers yesterday.
Oh really?
Or
That's funny.
Earlier this week. Yeah, and I just love that.
It's so beautifully. It's so the way the thought unfolds is just so elegant. You go with him. You just go. I see it all, and I feel, it's being painted on my skull as well. It's quite incredible trick in some ways, you know.
You know, I love it when there's a poem or a song or something out there in the world that finally captures that thing that I had not gotten far enough along in my own process to even attempt to express, you know?
Hmm. Yeah, and absolutely.
Ah.
No, this is when someone says it for you, it's a lot easier than trying to write it yourself as well.
Yeah,
It's like,
thanks,
thank
Billy
God.
Collins.
Thanks,
Say
Billy.
you get me off the
I'm
hook.
done. I don't have to do more poems. I'm giving
No,
up. I'm going to give up right now.
Yeah.
There's no point.
Yeah,
No,
he
I
can do
find
the
it-
work, and I'll
right.
just.
Just read the books. It's fine.
So good.
Yeah, so.
One of the books that I'm reading right now is
Yeah, what have you
called
got?
Grace by Natasha Deon.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, I would say, within the realm of Beloved by Toni Morrison.
Oh, okay.
In terms of context. In fact, I feel like there was a quote somewhere on the back by one of the, or maybe it was somewhere else that I read it. Well, it's sort of civil. Oh yeah, here. People will compare this book to 12 Years a Slave, Cold Mountain, and Beloved, and those are fair comparisons for the kind of time and place here, and the evocation of the South 150 years ago. This is what Rebecca Solnit says.
Mm-hmm.
She says here, but reading it, I thought of murder ballads, those songs of melancholy and
Ah.
injustice. Natasha Deon's genius lies in part in writing a book that sustains a murder ballad's intensity for hundreds of pages
Wow.
and then gets into your bones like a song. So that's what
Wow.
Rebecca Solnit says about this one.
Beautiful.
And I'm going to lose my page unless I stick something in there. I'm going to read just this little piece here. Josie talks in her head sometimes. She pretends to be a boy sometimes, too. She once stood above the pissing pot holding a short stick at her belly button and just let her bladder go. It got all down her leg and around her thigh, stopped herself mid-flow to clean up after what girls ain't supposed to do, stand. Being a woman means always having to bend at the knees, even for the simplest relief. So she ain't a bad girl, just different is all. She don't curse, but she spit. Digs for bugs, but not boogers. She make knives and doll babies, wear trousers under her dress, considers things most girls wouldn't, and certainly not at 7. Even her singing voice is manly. She'll puff out her chest and hit low notes like an old black man. She's out in the field now singing Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, notes as low and as deep as she can imagine. Her chariot sounds like cherry-uh-ut. Josie, please, Ada May say, plucking the cotton from her ears. Ain't enough cotton in the world to keep that dying dog noise out of Dee's ears. Josie grins through her blonde strands and opens her mouth to start again, trying not to laugh or run out of breath before she gets the whole verse out. So, the blonde strands, she's very light-skinned, black.
Mm-hmm.
I used to think she could, because of course race is a social construct, right? I used to think she could see me. So the narrator is her mother who's dead, who's a ghost. I used to think she could see me. I thought the both of them could. Turns out Josie was just recalling the things her daddy had told her in the day and would repeat aloud like she was talking to somebody. Read my lips, she'd say. No. And didn't I say no? And no means no. I was always near Josie then, just a step away in her daytimes, and in her nights I'd be standing next to her bed, watchful, waiting. Now I keep to the trees where I stay, mostly, back in the corner of her room at night. Where'd you learn that horrible song? Ada May say. This song? Swing low, sweet chariot. Josie chases Ada May, sucks in big breaths as she goes, sending the air back out in song. They slip-slide on slick purple leaves and around a berry bush, scraping thin lines on their legs and arms from thorns. Ada May escapes in a twirl around a tree trunk. Her dress gathers between her legs from speed. Stop it, Josie. Promise me you're gonna quit, or I tell you the truth, I'll leave you here and let the witch of the woods get you. These are my woods, Josie say. Can't nobody find me here if I don't want 'em to, and if you leave me here, you'll be here by yourself. Honest, Ada May, who would carry you but me? Josie's laughter becomes hard coughs. All these Negro children out here alone about to get ate up, she say, coughing through it. But you safe, Ada Mae. The witch would need a big old mouth to eat you. Well, she ain't gonna eat you either. You ain't a Negro. I'm black just like you, she say, just not so colored is all. Fine, Ada Mae say. I'm Negro too. Josie's cough becomes barking. She squats where she is, hard breathing like she just finished a long race. She closes her eyes and slowly lets air in and out of her throat. Swallows a few times. A whistle joins her exhale. I know these signs. You all right? Ada Mae say. Need some water? Josie grabs her chest, clawing at it to squeeze a bit of air. Ada Mae pats Josie hard on the back, and each swat brings a short whistle. You need some water? Josie's eyes redden with strain. She fixes them on Ada Mae, and they roll back behind her closing lids. I'll get Charles, Ada Mae say, scared now. But Josie grabs her arm, stops her, mumbles raspy words in a whisper. Stay, please. Ada Mae sits and holds Josie's hand, wipes the sweat from her cheeks, hoping that Josie's panting will fade. But her whistles rise. One day, Josie say, I'm gonna marry me a black man, dark as blue. Then there ain't gonna be no mistaking who I am. So, that's just a little
Wow.
piece of that.
That's amazing. Carry on.
No, that's all you get.
No, I'm sorry. I'm going to sit here all afternoon listening to you read that story. Thanks very much indeed. That's
You know what's
great.
funny? I used to read aloud to my two stepdaughters when they were younger, and the older one, Emerson, loved it. She loved hearing the stories. But the younger one, after a couple years of it, we went through A Wrinkle in Time and Heidi and all the Little House on the Prairie books. We went through Anne of Green Gables. We went through a lot of books, but at some point in time, the younger one, she started having a fit every night. She did not like being read to, which is so interesting because at the beginning of this conversation, you said how much you love it, and I do too.
Yeah.
And my older stepdaughter loved it too, but the little one, God, it in the end, I just finally gave up. But the older one's like, yeah, bring it. Like, let's hear the stories.
funny.
Just read to me. Do the work.
Yeah, exactly. Wonderful.
Simon, we're getting to the end here. Let's take it out in song. Will you play a song for
Yeah,
us?
absolutely. I'm going to turn on my reverberation.
Your reverberation.
Is that working? I don't know. And I'm going to pick up this guitar, and I'm going to, I wrote the song last week, I think. Yeah, that's good enough, I think. And it's called, it's got some furniture in it. We were talking about that last week. And I loved it. It's a little bit of furniture.
I love furniture.
Yeah, and it's called Somewhere to Wait. She said, forget about the wires, forget about the machines, forget about the waiting rooms and all the year-old magazines. Remember me as I first came to you. And if there's somewhere to wait, I'll be waiting for you. Nobody ever said that they love goodbye. Nobody wants to wake up alone in the morning light. But right now I need you to stand strong and tall and true. And if there's somewhere to wait, I'll be waiting for you. Go climb up a mountain, see what's on the other side. Take a year to be lonely, take as long as you need to cry. no way around this. You're just gonna have to go through. If there's somewhere to wait, I'll be waiting for you. Somewhere to wait. I hope there's somewhere to wait. I hope there's some other place. She said, forget about these wires, forget about these screens. Forget about the victories and the hard times in between. Remember, you're the reason for everything I've tried to do. And if there's somewhere to wait, I'll be waiting for you. If there's somewhere to wait, I'll be waiting for you. If there's somewhere to wait, I'll be waiting for you.
Oh, damn. I hope you guys have cry towels in your merch. Wow.
Thanks.
Did you write that about a particular person?
Yeah. I think, yeah, I was hiking and I was thinking about what will happen, you know, and how we don't know what will happen. And I thought of the line, and I thought of the idea for the song. Yeah.
I'm really glad that I'm not sitting like in the quiet of a club right now. Like, I'm picturing the Ojai Underground Exchange, because I think I would just be drenched in tears. It's a really
bless
powerful
you.
song. Beautiful.
Thank you. Thanks.
And it just, the way that it starts, forget about the wires, you know, you don't know where you are. And I feel like, you know, that moment of, you know, songs, it's like 3 minutes, 4 minutes, maybe 5. You enter a world, it's like you're entering a room, and you don't know anything about the room, and you get I mean, going back to furniture, I guess, you know,
Right.
you get like little bits of information, and the first one, you know, forget about the wires. What is the next line? Forget about the screens.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, where am I? But then when I'll be, you know, if there's somewhere to wait, I'll be waiting for you. When that lands, it's so powerful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, it was. Yeah, I mean, it's. I like the fact that I like the fact that she's still taking care of him, even though she's the one that's leaving. I love that, you know.
Yeah.
So I think maybe that's why I had to put it into second person rather than the being sung to rather than singing the song, I guess. So, but yeah, it's an emotional process, right? This is the thing. It's like I remember I was writing it and I wasn't, and I was caught up in the mechanics of writing, you know, and allowing the song to open to wherever it went. There's this thing that, funny enough, let's go back to Billy Collins quickly, but he says, just allow the pen to run across the page.
Yeah.
Don't you know, once you start this stuff, if you're lucky, it's got a life of its own. You know, if you're lucky, you're just there to capture the life of its own that's happening. And so I was allowing that to happen, and that's a certain creative space. Also, I was writing early in the morning and super quietly because I was asleep and the dog was fortunately not awake yet. And you know, so I'm writing quietly, and and the import of what I was saying didn't hit me emotionally until I was quite a long way through the song,
Yeah.
and then I was like, oh,
Oh, yeah.
oh, this works, you know,
Yeah.
it's working, you know. So
Yeah, you know, people talk about, they talk about, that mystery of the creative process. It's like, is it God? Is it divine? What is the muse? What is it? But what if it's just the song? Like, it's a collaboration between you and the song is that other thing. And it's like you're both kind of helping each other along somehow.
I love
The song
that.
needs you to write it down.
Right.
If the song needs you to sing it, otherwise it won't be heard. But it's like the song has also got its own kind of agency, its own agenda, its own needs that have to be satisfied.
Definitely, it's its
Yeah.
own entity, right? And that's
Yeah, wow.
what's so strange about the whole process. But again, I'll come back to the word magical. It's like if it's working, you kind of have to stay out of the way almost, you know.
Yeah.
Which is, and then sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes you're just grinding away at the rock face for weeks on end, you know, and that works too. But if
Yeah.
but if you're lucky, just just keep out of the way.
Wow.
I love talking about songs with you. I have to say, it's so interesting. It's so great to hear your process and see where it differs and see where it's the same. I went on I was very lucky. I went on something called summer camp when I was signed to Warner Chappell, and it was 20 songwriters, Warner Chappell writers up in Lake Arrowhead, and from all, you know, kind of Nashville people and rock people and rap guy and all kinds of different writers, and we all had to write a song. They put us into threes, and you have to write a song and record it that day. And it was the most fun you could possibly ever have.
Yeah.
And but what was interesting was it doesn't matter really what genre you come from or what you're used to writing in. Songwriters we have like shorthand. You know, we have like a really common. There's a common. It's a common system of working at what's good and bad. We'd write the song and then everyone would be like, so is there anything we need to change? And everybody would be like, verse 3, line 2, can we make that stronger? Everyone says the same line. You know, everyone's happy with the other stuff. It was amazingly. I thought it would be a process of arguing your case with the other writers,
Right.
To try and change it to make it work the way you would make it work. And it seemed that it was much more collaborative, and it was much more just finding the better. You know, we're going to make this better, make it better, and there it
Yeah.
is. You know, and
Yeah.
I love that idea. And I feel like when we're talking about
Yeah.
the specifics of writing, that's there's so many similarities,
Yeah.
which is great.
Yeah. Yeah. Going back to that Laurie McKenna interview that I was listening to this week, well, that thing, she's in this trio, songwriting trio. I mean, she writes with a lot of people, but her main trio is called the Love Junkies. And that's something, like this idea of a trio, 3 people in a songwriting room versus, maybe 20 years ago, maybe it would be 2 people generally, or, I mean, of course, there's sometimes those 7-person songs, but that 3-person, that triangle. And she was saying in the interview that whenever you walk into a co-writing situation, you kind of have to figure out what your role is that day. And your role is going to be different depending, sometimes you're the artist, but sometimes you're not the artist, or sometimes you're the person that gets the coffee, or the person that just tells the story about what they're going through. And then it's like, what is your role that particular day?
Yeah. And sometimes it's staying out of the way, I guess,
Yeah,
as well.
exactly. Yeah, letting the thing happen.
Yeah.
Oh man.
What have you got for us?
I played this song I think a couple of weeks ago. I'm trying to remember what my process was in the writing of it. I was thinking about Florida, which is, like I said, where I'm from originally. And then I moved away, and then I moved back in 12th grade. And I had a miserable year, that last year of high school, living in this new town, this new state, and as you can imagine. But one of the difficulty, or not difficulties, but one of the characteristics of that year also was that I was in this beautiful place. I was in South Florida on the Atlantic side, and the downtown was right on the edge of a river, the St. Lucie River, and I have no idea why I started thinking about that downtown area a couple of months ago, but I did. I was thinking about the river dock. I think I was maybe flipping through like a AAA magazine or something like that. I think that there was like a Florida, I don't know, I had like a moment of, you know, just this never happens, but this moment of, oh, maybe I would move back to Florida someday. And literally that's never happened to me. So it kind of took me by surprise, and I entertained it for a little while. I was like, yeah, what are all the nice things about Florida? My dad lives there, and so there are some nice things about Florida, but haven't wanted to live there in a long, long time.
Right.
But this song to me is about this particular river dock that would extend out into the St. Lucie River, and is the sort of place where people would come to, you know, mark those special moments in time. I was thinking at the moment of the beginning of the song, I was thinking about the prom, and people would take their dates down there, but I was really thinking, like, this is the sort of place that people, you know, go to when they're kids, and then when they're young adults, and when they're middle adults, and when they're older adults, and it's like this place that you just kind of come back to again and again, and the place doesn't really change much, but, you know, there are a lot of moments in your life that you could mark by this sort of place. So it's called the River Dock at Sunset. Let's try this. On the river dock at sunset, beneath the crayon box of sky, last moments being supervised, cameras pinned us down like butterflies. We clipped flowers onto dresses, coupled off against the chill, cusp of honeysuckle summer evening, and every word we spoke full of meaning. On the river dock at sunset, the ones who taught us how to stand, reminiscing over rubber-soled shoes, wondering how we got to heels and hairdos. And constellations turn above the river that keeps flowing by. Time on earth keeps slipping by. There's a difference between keeping something safe and helping it to grow. On the river dock at sunset, through the lens of passing years, half between leaving and lingering, we try to learn how to love without worrying. And constellations turn above the river that keeps flowing by. Time on earth keeps slipping by. There's a difference between keeping something safe and helping it to grow. On the river dock at sunset, along the worn and weathered boards, nothing's meant to stay, but still letting go is the hardest drill. And constellations turn above the river that keeps flowing by. Time on earth keeps slipping by. There's a difference between keeping something safe and helping it to grow. Moments like the waves of the watershed, on the river dock at sunset. On the river dock at sunset.
Oh, it's lovely.
Thank you.
I love it. I love the the dock's the fixed place and everything is moving around it. The constellations and the river, everything's moving. It's the only fixed spot. That's really lovely. What a great idea! It's a great idea for a song. I don't think it's. I'm trying to think of something that's similar, but I can't really think of anything.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I forgot until midway through singing it, and I you forget about the very seed of the song. Where did this start? And so I told you where I thought it started, but then halfway through the song, I remembered that do you know the writer Alexander Chee?
No.
He has a beautiful book called Edinburgh, he calls it an autobiographical novel. It's a novel, but it's heavily based on his life, and he's a really beautiful writer, lovely language. But before I had read Edinburgh, part of the reason I read it was because I don't spend a lot of time on Twitter, but I stumbled upon a tweet of his, and the tweet was something like, one of the lines in the song was inspired by this tweet. I'm trying to remember which line it was. There's a difference between keeping something safe and helping it to grow. That wasn't the line that he tweeted, but that was inspired by the tweet, and that was the seed of the song that I think just got me, thinking about that relationship with parents and spouses or partners, all of this stuff, children.
Very cool.
So
lovely.
Simon, this has been a great conversation.
It's been so fun.
Yeah. Thank you
for having me on.
Guest.
It's been great. I really enjoyed I was in the bedroom last week listening on headphones. I really enjoyed your conversation with Celia too. So wonderful. Thank you for having us both.
It's been great to have you both on back to back. Folks who are watching, if you missed last week, of course you can find the archives always on my website, ArielleSilvermusic.com, or just by going to that link that's scrolling through the bottom. There's a link to Tomes and Tunes. Where are you playing? I think you've got some shows coming up, so
we have
give you an opportunity to.
Well, we have actually that song that I just played and a couple more. We recorded them last Saturday with We Are the West, and they're going to be on the radio tonight on 99.1 KBOO at 9 o'clock. The Golden Hour is the name of the radio show. So if you look up the Golden Hour, you can find an online link, and that's the next thing that's happening, which is tonight. And the next gig will be at the Ojai Underground Exchange.
Oh, yeah.
Our favourite. Are we allowed to say that? I'm going to say it. It's our favourite venue.
It's so beautiful.
It's the best place ever. And that's going to be on Saturday the 4th.
Right, okay.
Yeah, Saturday the 4th, really soon. Saturday the 4th
Labor
of
Day
September.
weekend, folks. Labor Day weekend.
Oh, wow, that's happening already.
So that's
Wow.
Petty Chavez that's playing, right?
That's Petty Chavez, yeah.
And it's a live stream also, in addition to an in-person.
Yes.
Is that right?
I say that. That's the last time
I
we did
think
it. We've been live streaming. In fact, we live streamed from there with no audience a couple of times during the pandemic, which was great because, it's like trying to set your own stuff up, and just having Bernie with his amazing cameras and his beautiful sound and his crazy backgrounds and him doing everything was such a relief and lovely. So we're really looking forward to that. So that's the next official Petty Chavez show. Next weekend.
I think it's Ojai Underground. I'm trying to put it in the chat. Undergroundexchange.com. I think that's right.
I think that's right, definitely. But if you go to pettychavezmusic.com, you'll be able to get, all the info there for tonight's radio show and for the next gigs. And sign up to our mailing list, and we'll let you know all that kind of stuff.
There you go. I love my mailing list, by the way. I'm so glad that you just said for people to sign up on your mailing list. I'm going to sign up on your mailing list. I like receiving the mailing lists, letters from bands and artists that I love, and I have to say that I love writing to my mailing list. I feel like it's a really special relationship. I think all of us know what happened to MySpace, and that may one day happen to the behemoth of Facebook, but mailing lists are like
Never
your
know.
own, yeah, it's not tied to a platform. So,
Right.
so folks, I put the pettychavezmusic.com website in the chat, and
Thanks. Great.
yeah, thank you, Simon.
Thanks for
I'll say
having me.
goodbye to you behind the scenes in our very special green room. Don't drink all the drinks. Don't eat all the biscuits.
Oh, that's already happened. I'm afraid.
And I'll say goodbye to everybody else here. Thank you so much for tuning in. This was such a wonderful conversation. Last week's with Celia was also fantastic, and I just love that they're both individually such awesome people, and then together when they sing and play together, there's a real magic that happens. So I hope that you will follow them if you're not already following them. Whatever your favorite social media platforms are, if you go to Instagram, find Petty Chavez and Simon Petty and Celia Chavez on Instagram. Find them on Facebook. Find them on YouTube. You know, that's the way to do it. Those like individual likes or hearts or follows or whatever the platform uses for their terminology, you wouldn't believe it, but just every single individual person doing that helps independent artists a great deal. We don't have big machines behind us to pump out, you know, big marketing and promotional campaigns. So really, it's you know, word of mouth and these individual actions by people who appreciate what we're trying to do and what we are doing. And likewise, if you like what I'm doing, I hope that you will find me on all those platforms and sign up on my mailing list. You can do that right at that linktree /ArielleSilver that's going by, or my website, always ArielleSilver.com and ArielleSilvermusic.com. They will both get you to me. So that's it. Thank you. Be safe. Oh, I want to tell you who is going to be on the show next week. I'm very excited to have Laura Joy from Arizona. She and I have crossed paths, virtual paths, a bunch of times actually over the last year and a half, and I'm excited to actually have the time to have a conversation with her and hear about what's going on in her world. So I hope you'll join me same time next week for Laura Joy. And you can always find the archives on my website as well. We got everything. I know a few of you who are chiming in and watching the show have been guests on the show before, so that's cool. Anyway, folks, please, I saw a meme that the vaccination is a gateway drug to live music. Please be careful out there. Get your vaccinations. That's the position that I take, and I hope that you are vaccinated. But please wear your masks. This Delta thing is banana bonkers, and we want to be able to sing for you. And when we sing, we can't wear masks. So we're hoping that the audience will, you know, take care of us while we're up there singing. That's all I got. I will see you next time. Until then, take good care.